Council workshop of December 23rd, 2021 shall come to order. Entertain a motion to approve the agenda, please.
So moved. Second.
By Ben, seconded by Mike, that we approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carries. Number 3 on the agenda, South 15th Street Urban Renewals / Park Redevelopment Project Control. Mr. Flores.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, just give a quick introduction. And we have Krista King with Berglund and Cram here, who's going to do a review for us again. So a few meetings ago, Christy was here and reviewed the concept plan for the proposed South 15th Street Park project, and it was very well received, I think, by the council, and I've heard many comments publicly, and noticed on social media is very positive reactions to that. So what we would like to do is proceed with kind of identifying what kind of scope for the project we want to proceed with in terms of the budget as well as the timeline for the project. So I don't have anything further, Christy, if you want to just go ahead and start a review.
Welcome, Christy. Berglund Cram. Appreciate your being here.
Good morning. And I have some budget handouts.
Okay.
If you guys want to pass these down and follow around.
Are these the same ones you had before?
What's that?
Are these an updated one or the?
That's what I sent you.
Okay, they've got it.
Yep. Oh, okay,
Yep.
great. Okay. So, yeah, I think just a quick recap of, the process this park concept was put together with the committee and city staff, a wide variety of people. So the part of that process was really to, put a vision in place, really talk about all the dreams and schemes, the wants and the needs, and kind of get it all into a vision that could then be framework to go forward and actually execute this project. So we put a high-level budget together, and at this point in the process, when it is really just kind of a vision, right, some schematics, we usually approach that as far as a range, kind of a low and a high-end range, because there's a lot of decisions that still need to be made, a lot of things that could, stay in the project or maybe are future phase in the project, so that's kind of why you have a range there. But really what that boils down to, without going kind of through every item, and I'm happy to explain anything if you have questions, but that gets us basically to a range of about 1.9 to 2.8 million, right? And that's a wide range because, again, there's a lot of decisions in there still. What is the park shelter? What's in it? What does it look like? How big is the splash pad? So there's just some refinement in there. So that's the range. Now, I know you guys have discussed a target budget of 1.8 million. That's correct?
Yeah.
So what that really tells us is just that's our target to then work toward refining the concept, toward getting the most we can within that budget that speaks to the concept. And as Scott and I discussed, that might, as we refine the drawings and refine exactly what this is, that might mean we can get most of it within that budget, or that might mean maybe there's components of it that are potentially a future phase. I think some of the maybe opportunities for things we could tease out and think about as a future phase are, the committee did discuss a couple shelter spaces within that park. Maybe one of those shelters or those two shelters kind of combine into one in one central location. So that's something we could look at and kind of continue to refine. We did also, as part of this budget, put in some additional play equipment that was above and beyond what the Everybody Plays Committee has already fundraised for and secured, and that equipment is already purchased. The committee did talk about some additional equipment, so maybe that's something that happens down the road. The committee also talked about kind of a berm or kind of a hill type component, so that we were introducing something into the park that wasn't just like a flat playground, but something we were actually building up, maybe even go underneath it. I do have that actually outside of that budget range already, anticipating that might be something that we need to think about as a future or as a compromise part. Then, of course, the biggest thing we could think about phasing is, I would say, the splash pad itself. So knowing that the playground equipment is already secured, that's kind of the catalyst for this project, getting that done, getting that up and running, and if need be, once we know a little bit more about the design and the budget, we could look at the splash pad possibly being, you know, a next phase of the overall park campus. So those are just some initial thoughts on possible phasing.
Also, Christie, in terms of like the project schedule, you and I had talked about lead times on some of the projects, so maybe if we could talk. So I'd like to kind of have a good, robust discussion about where everyone's opinions are on the cost and where y'all would like to be on that. I mean, like I've said, we've kind of talked about the 1.8 million as sort of a sweet spot for this project. So I'd like to have some conversation on that. But in terms of the schedule for this project, you know, we're probably looking at like a winter tear down on the secondary road department buildings there, site preparation and design, and then bidding probably, you know, sometime in March, you know, so probably like a late spring, early summer start date for construction, and I'm not sure completion date, you know, might be towards the fall, you know, into fall, something like that, so.
Yeah, and I think that's something we want to be really realistic about, you know, what's happening out there in availability of materials, availability of contractors. We're seeing a little bit of everything, and it's just something to be aware of, that as we go forward in the project, that we look at ways to be able to move things forward as they can. So for instance, some materials lead times are virtually unchanged, and it's really nothing that's to be worried about and nothing to be changed. Some other things, like play components, we do have another somewhat similar project, and some of those components have a 30-week lead time. So it's just something we want to be aware of, that might dictate really when things can start. And really, if we're possibly, you know, starting a little bit later in the year, once we design, once we coordinate with consultants, touch base with the committees also. I would assume we want to do that, just make sure that process is continuous. And getting a bid, starting construction, if that is a little bit later in the year and it's maybe spanning kind of the end of this year, maybe finishing up some things that we're possibly waiting on lead times for into next year, getting finished up before the play season of 2023. So that's something we need to just keep an eye on and be realistic about.
Okay, Christie, thanks. The questions here. The cost analysis, the sheet that we've just received, that left column, is that where you have already pared down the cost to 1.9?
Yeah, the left column is kind of the low end range of all the wants and needs that basically the schematics reflect, and the right side column is kind of the high end cost range of that. So I would say even within that, there's a little that, like, we could take out completely the additional play components, which, yes, I guess I see in that one particular, we did take that to 0. So if you see that right under site costs, that first line where it says play components, you see the range all the way over is 0 to 40 grand. So yes, that would be the low end of what the vision, the schematics reflect. But we could outright take some things out, like again, the additional shelter, we could just take that out.
All right, so that's, if my math is right, the difference between the two that we have listed as total cost estimate down there from 1.92, where they were 900,000 plus.
Yep, right.
From a possible goal here. And even we're talking about the 1.8, you got 100,000 on the one on the left as well to get that.
And I mean, I think that's something that, you know, we see a lot, and it's just part of the process when you ask a committee, right, to come together and envision, and that's what you want. You want, what is our goal out there that you want to see, and then, okay, what does that cost? But as far as executing a project, then knowing what the realistic budget target is from the city's standpoint will only help the process if everybody knows those expectations, and maybe there are some things we need to, you know, phase or compromise on, but better to do that than kind of go for everything and
Yep.
then have it be something you can't afford at all, so.
Right. And in the schematic concept design plays, there, we operated under the assumption of not, you know, knowing a budget, having a value there, and so, you know, designing it from scratch. This is what we'd like to have, and then I think Christie's done a nice job giving us a range of, well, this is on the low end, this is on the high end, what you could be looking at for that. Now I think it's on our end to say, okay, we like the concept, and we see what the range of the cost could be, and now we're gonna, the next step would be for us to tell the designer, this is where we want to be in terms of cost.
You know, one more comment, and I want to open it up, but I think the last time that representative group met was here, and Creighton was with me at that time, so correct me if I'm wrong here. But that was a very well-working group, I thought, and they presented all their, you know, wants, as we called them at that time, and so, and I don't think this is going to be a problem for them at that particular time. Now, we talked about possibility of doing this in stages. So if we pare this down, my word, to 1.9 or 1.8, can some of the things that we've taken out, and I think construction-wise, can they be put in at a later time for basically the same amount here?
So yeah, I think if we know that, right, if we know that there's going to be some future phasing, and we identify within this refinement process over the next couple months when we're really, we're really getting into actual drawing and figuring things out. If we know that there's, you know, an amount or a desire in the future that there's future money to execute some other things, I think we, right in this round of drawings, identify what that is, where do those things go, right? How big are they? What are the potential costs? And we can set them aside, and they can phase in at a future time. And just all the better if we can, though, design ahead of time for where those things are happening.
And then I think our strategy, like we talked, would be to maybe potentially bid some of those things as alternate bids, and then determine at that point whether or not we want to proceed. You know, we do that on almost every project
Correct.
we ever have. So it's like,
Yep.
sometimes we take everything, sometimes we don't, and then sometimes we come back later and add something in after the fact. So
Yep.
but good to have it designed for ahead of time.
Right, and I think, and so balancing, what those alternates are. We don't want to overcomplicate things for potential bidders that there's, that the project appears to be complicated, but we can certainly identify some things that either, yes, make it or make it in the future. Now, if it's something way in the future, will the contractors hold those costs? Probably not, but right, we just need to know that we'll have a general idea of what they cost, but depending on how far in the future they happen, they might be a bit more.
Okay, thanks. All right, I want to call on Councilman, then we can open it up at anything. But Dana, what say you? What comments do you have at this point, listening to what Christie has said and the rest of us have said and so on?
Christie, let me ask you this question. As far as like the lead times for 30 weeks, what's the material or the contractors that are needing that amount of time?
Well, we really want to caution not scaring any projects, because that's occasional things that we're running into. But some of the things we're seeing are very random things, but in particular kind of related to this project. We're doing another splash pad and playground project up in Osage, and lead times on the park equipment kind of started at 20 weeks, went to 24 weeks, and went to 30 weeks. Now, that's just one vendor. That's one vendor that community has chosen to work with. So, again, I think there's just, let's know that, but let's then seek out what's our best path forward. If that's maybe one or two vendors that are seeing that, then let's see what else is out there. But it's kind of a...
I'll jump in there real
Yep.
quick. So data, like, for example, I think Adam Long, the wellness director, has mentioned a few times, when he started here sometime, I think it was in July, one of the first things we ordered was indoor playground equipment. We'll be lucky to have that in a few weeks. So, July to into January is some pretty substantial time there. So, I mean, I use one of Gary's expressions, it is what it is. I mean, we're just gonna have to deal with those things, and I don't think they're insurmountable obstacles, but they're just things that we have to be aware of and know. And I think, as you introduced early on, our expectations have to reconcile with that.
Correct, yeah.
Is the playground equipment purchased?
Yes.
Already.
So for your particular project, the playground equipment is already secured, but then we're talking splash pad components. We without having dug into that exactly what those components are, what the exact availability of that is. That's maybe something just as a heads up for us to consider in the next couple months as we refine the design and we start understanding that a little bit better. But we do also want to say there are lots of other equipment and components that aren't seeing those increases. But when you're talking about just the progression of construction, that has to take into consideration what does have longer lead times. So I think if we just know that, we can plan for that.
Scott, my other question would be more for the budgeting. So 1.8 is just a goal that we have right now for this from beginning to end, let's say. Does that include the demolition and the purchase of the property?
Well, that's kind of the overall goal. So I mean, we bought the property quite some time ago, so that's done. No, but no, this would be for the actual project that you see here today. I mean, I don't know that the demolition is going to be an enormously costly kind of thing. So I really like you to focus on what you see on the paper before you. Do you like it? Do you want to proceed with that? And how does a $1.8 million budget for what you see on paper before you strike you?
Thank you, I'm good.
Ben?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. I think, one of the great things about this is that an all-inclusive playground for Clear Lake and for North Iowa would be very unique, right, Christy?
Correct, yeah.
And I think it has the potential to really be a unique treasure for Clear Lake and all of North Iowa. So my instincts are to say, yes, we have some budget constraints. We've talked about doing it in phases, but in terms of what I would like to see us do as an overall vision for it is for it to be a state-of-the-art facility. I think one of the things we encounter here is we do have a very low interest rate environment. That's going to change next year, according to the projections by the Federal Reserve. The inflation component, the supply chain issues. So I guess on the one hand, given our low level of indebtedness, Scott, my thought would be, it might be wise to look at this to borrow, to do the entire project, given the delays and things like that. Now, again, if we have to do it in phases according to your budget projections, I'm fine with that. I guess my overall thinking is, though, I'd like to see it be a really state-of-the-art facility for us with the splash pad and things like that. Also, I would comment, the community itself has raised a significant amount of money on the private side for this project, so there's significant support in the community. So, I don't know, but that's kind of my thoughts.
Yep, we always like to leverage those kinds of philanthropy dollars, if you will. So, yeah, I think, again, we've seen the borrowing, the very little bit of borrowing that we've done in the past come in at just simply epic levels. Not unheard of in modern times. As I mentioned before, the one debt issue we did, I can't remember if it was the one when we bought this property and the Woodford property or the one for the hotel project. But yeah, I've worked with a gentleman who's a Georgetown law guy for 60 years, municipal law practice, doing bonding work, and he said that was the lowest rate of interest he'd seen in a 60-year career, and we got it. So
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, borrowing is not a bad word.
Yeah, and I think also given the fact that we're only at 6% of our GO bond limit, correct?
Yeah, so that was with that recent borrowing.
Yeah, exactly, including all that. I would feel differently if we were higher, and that type of thing. But I think also, again, it's just a really great project. I mean, where is the nearest park that would even come close to the
I think
ideas we've got here?
Wasn't it Cedar Falls?
Yeah, there's one in, I believe it's Cedar Falls. Yep, and right now, Osage is planning to add some inclusive equipment to one of their existing parks and develop a splash pad. But in working with that group and people that are that have children, that they actually go to Cedar Falls or even further out when they know that there's those kind of parks. So I think if you do it well and you do it right, it will, like we've talked about, serve the community, but other people will also seek it out and come to this community.
We've really categorized it as a destination opportunity for Clear Lake and Saragordo County.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And given the importance of retaining population, growing our population, recruiting young families with kids, whether visitors or permanent residents, I think it's just very important for us to, perhaps again, aim for the high end on this project to make it a really excellent project for Clear Lake.
Gary?
Well, I disagree with you, Bennett. I lean towards the 1.9 or 1.8. I do not like borrowing money. And it's kind of a personal thing, but I think we can accomplish just as good a project at the 1.9 or 1.8 and satisfy all the needs that are required here. That's all I have to say about it.
Now, we'll throw, and we definitely are planning on borrowing for the project.
I understand that, but we don't need to go so grandiose here.
Just a quick question, if I could, related to Gary's comment. Does the 1.8 include the splash pad?
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so again, to look at the kind of the estimate here, right? That is showing the splash pad with the low end estimate at 1.9. So right, so that's saying if we design a splash pad to a certain level, we think we can get it into the 1.9, 1.8 range. But there'll just need to be some decisions made in there as far as how large or how extensive that part of the project is to make sure it stays on the lower level, lower end
Okay.
range.
So it'll affect the size of it, the features, potentially things like that?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mike?
Do both of the columns already include the money that the citizens raised for the equipment?
Nope, so that's kind of in the gray below that end total. So that's outside of that.
Okay, so basically, we can add close to $250,000 to the total anyway that's
Right.
already paid for.
Right.
That the project is costing overall.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know that I know exactly where
I-
that raised amount is, but I believe it was around 148,000,
Okay.
somewhere in there, yeah.
I guess I was led to believe they had raised a little more than that, but,
That you might know more than I do
Yeah, it was
on
more
that.
like $250,000.
Yeah.
all right.
Right.
So
Yep.
we're already at a point where we're spending more than we're going to continue to put into it, I guess, when you total it out. I'm all in on this thing, and I think eventually, we do need to make it everything it can be. But we've got a lot of projects coming our way next year. I mean, they're just things coming at us from every direction right now as a city. We have a lot of people wanting different things to do different projects, and we've also got our last 6-8 blocks of Main Avenue to deal with, and I guess I would rather stick with the basics on this right now, after hearing Christie say that we can indeed add additional amenities if they're planned for in the future. You know, grew up in an era where there were lots of car dealerships around. There still are. Most of them are just bigger today. But many times they had a line of cars that went from the Cadillac to the Buick to the Oldsmobile to the Chevrolet. And most of us would have loved to have walked on to the dealership and bought the Cadillac, but many times the Chevrolet became the way to go. And I mean, it got you from point A to point B, and I think even on the low end of this thing, most of it's going to hit at least the Oldsmobile or Buick level, and I can see you're glazing over with my analogy here. But
Throwing Mercury, up on the Mercury.
well, not all of us can be driving a 90 Mercury Marquis with new tires, but we can only hope.
Took the white balls off.
I guess the other thing, I think this is going to be well received, but I wonder if we get the basics down and we see just how popular it is and how much use there is, if it's just one of the most important spots in Clear Lake outside of the city beach and the seawall and the city park, then it would make sense to add some of the additional amenities. But if the use is on the low end, and it seems to be satisfying all the wants and needs of those using it, maybe we hit it on the mark to start with. And so I'm always in favor of planning and getting everything set up so it can indeed be added to and expanded, and we've got plenty of ground out there. But what I recall about the initial approach by this group, they wanted a place to put it. And at first, we were probably going to put it at the outdoor rec area. And you know, they were desperate to have some area. And it wouldn't have become anything close to what we're going to make this. So I think even on the low end, it's going to be pretty special. And and Scott could answer this a lot better than I can, but it might fit into our next year budget better, and we could plan moving forward. A few years ago, we had just built a fire station, and we put that out on a bond vote, and it passed in a very large percentage, and we built a fire station. And there was a need to take the old fire station and do some remodeling on the 1965 City Hall. And rather than dive right in and do another bond issue, we opted to put some money in our budget over the course of the next 4 years. And ultimately, we did this. We fixed up the PD. And we didn't borrow any money. We just wrote the check when we got the project done. So I mean, if there's other things that we know we're going to want, maybe that would be an approach to work on that. But
Yeah, I think on that one, I just jump in. I think one thing we want to be careful about is, by doing that, the cost for us right now of borrowing versus what the cost of inflation is. So if we look out and project out, if it takes us 4 years to save up and do a project, and the cost of the materials and building the project is going to probably far outpace what we can borrow the money for to do it now, especially when we're seeing, they said the last issue was 0.34%. We're looking at 6.8% now on inflation. So it is prudent to try to save and put money aside, but you've got to also kind of keep that in mind too, that the cost of materials is growing at a pretty exponential pace. So.
yeah, and maybe that isn't the right approach, what I'm suggesting for this. So, I yield there. But I still think there's things that on this that if we're going to do it, we need to do it. But I think there's a variety of amenities on here that are more of a wish list than we really need this for this project. And maybe those are the ones that could wait. However we go about paying for it in the future. And I guess I'll ask you this. I mean, if we went to the ultimate end of this thing, does it fit into the budget, and where are we at with all of that?
Yeah, I think the ultimate end would be higher than what I would propose for you all. So that's why I've kind of suggested the sweet spot that I've had is actually even just slightly lower than the low end of that. So I think, again, that 1.8, 1.9 figure is probably something to be pretty comfortable with. But again, like we've talked, and like you're suggesting, Mike, is I think it's very prudent to design it with these other opportunities. And, I think Christie having an understanding of where the feel of the council is on regard to the budget can help her design things like the splash pad and kind of, again, frame the overall project to fit much more consistent with that lower parameter than the higher parameter.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. Basically, that's why one of the main reasons we got you and Creighton sitting around with the pencils and the calculators and kind of tell us which of these things work the best. And I surely don't have any problem with some of these things, but I'm just not sure moving forward until we really get a feel for how heavily this is going to be used and what type of use it's going to get. This is the time where we need to throw everything out there.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I think, like you suggested, even on the lower parameter here, this will still be spectacular.
Yeah, you're right. It will be.
My last comments, and we need to get moving on here, but I think we should do it. I think we should do it now. These people have been people who have raised the money, and it was my assumption that they were up around 265.
Yeah, something.
Somewhere then. And it's not just individual people, but it's groups and perhaps businesses are in there. I don't know what it all entails or who donated, but it's very important that these people see something as quickly as, we can do within our fiduciary responsibilities. That's why we're doing diligence here somewhat this morning, and we'll do it when we go on and continue with that. But, I look at this. Do we need 2 shelters? Blah, blah, blah. Can that be all worked in? And I'm sure with your skill, Christie, you can work that such that, we come as close to that 1.9, but still keeping items in there that will certainly meet the needs for our definition of an inclusive playground.
Yep.
Whether the berm is necessary or not. I like that berm. That would be fun to get up there as a little kid and roll down, but I see you've got an extra 25 grand there for that. So to to me, I could take a dump load of dirt and, put some, but it's not that easy.
Right.
And so, if you can go through and select some of these things, so as Scott says, you can come pretty much as close to that, and we are, this town is not destitute. Scott's heard me say this a lot, but we do need to look at our responsibilities. As I said, our fiduciary responsibilities, that's part of why we're here. And what do these people, in sitting in on all those meetings, they have certain things they would like to have for this and have told us and told us and told us. It's been going on for well over a year, maybe 18 months or more, but I think between you and Scott and us, we can get that down to where it's presentable to all of us and to the public and to this committee, which is a community committee that has been studying this for a long time, and certainly for the kids that are going to use it. Important.
Yep, there's always wants and needs, and
Yep.
there's also always a budget, so we gotta put those things together. Yep.
Any other comments, Council, Scott?
Nope, I think we've got.
Let's get going on it.
Great. Anything? You recited on that?
No, I'll just echo the comments that have already been made as far as this is an excellent project for the city. And not even looking at the park walls that we're building here, but how it plays into the pool that we have in that area and the surrounding neighborhood. It's an excellent project there. And then Scott's comments, I think, are right on as far as the borrowing rate being less than the inflationary rate, and taking that into account with what we're purchasing now, with what we purchase versus what we might purchase later. It's just a much better environment to purchase now if we can still, which in my opinion, we will be able to continue with those great rates. And if it's something anywhere close to what we've had in the past, I mean, a 0.37 on our last issue of 0.34, I mean, it's going to beat out inflation every time, so that's something to take into account, but a great project.
Are those rates being offered today?
Well, we wouldn't know until we send it out for
Yeah.
bid, but the environment is still the same as it was, but as Bennett said, within the next year, that'll be changing.
I know our Identity does the South, they borrowed, I think between 4 and 5 million, and they didn't get the rate we had.
Yeah, there's a reason
Yeah,
we said
exactly.
it right.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for that. But as I've said before, like when Chip from Northland kind of helped it through that, they've been doing it, I thought I got to frame that out. Like I said, when Bob helped us through it, 60 years, and he'd never seen anything like that. So, I mean, I think that speaks volumes to Clear Lake. When you say, is anybody else getting that? No. and I think our reputation with our local banks, that is very, very advantageous to us. So no, I would strongly suggest that there are very few entities with the capacity. We have almost zero debt whatsoever, and we have the fourth lowest tax rate in the state, and we've got the healthiest reserve funds in the state. So, I mean, you have to factor all of those things in, and there are very few communities I would say, not only in the Midwest, but in the country that are as well positioned as us to get those rates. So, no one's getting those rates.
Christy, do you have any questions for us?
I don't. I'm assuming, I guess maybe I do, as I say that. I'm assuming we'll want to continue to touch base with the committee,
yeah.
so I can kind of
Yep.
start putting some framework into
Yep.
place as far as when that might happen.
Yep.
to
And I
move
think,
forward.
just kind of roughing out the schedule so we can get some expectations out there to the public on demo and all that kind of stuff, so.
Yep, okay, all right.
Thank you.
All
Thanks
right,
for being
yeah.
here, and thanks for all the information and the work that you've done thus far. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
And Merry Christmas. Thanks for coming.
Okay, you have enough from us on that one, Scott?
Yep.
Okay, let's move on to number 4, ARP, American Rescue Plan projects for the water treatment plant.
So I may have Creighton kind of piggyback on this. He talked about this at previous meeting with kind of the money that the city has received and how much we're expected to receive. So maybe I'll let him give some more review on that. But I just want to kind of get us started on this. Creighton and I have been going through the budget process with department heads. And of course, everyone's aware of the ARP, American Rescue Plan, money that the city's going to be receiving. Every city and county and the country is getting revenue here. So it's pretty, Creighton covered this at the previous workshop, but pretty restricted on what we can do with these funds. Some of the, I know this council, for example, has always placed a high priority on infrastructure. So as we started going through the budget, we've got some infrastructure projects that I think we've just, Creighton and I have kind of collectively talked about as putting some emphasis on these. We've got our current storm sewer improvement project that we're working on now that would be an eligible item for these funds. That's about a $670,000 project. And then going through Adam's budget with him, there are some kind of things in the past that we've not included in upgrades to the water treatment plant, that this might be a unique opportunity to continue to invest in our water treatment plant there. So maybe Creighton, you want to give some background on kind of how much money we've gotten, what we expect to get, and maybe just a little more review on that one. But I know some other communities are doing some other things with the dollars that they're getting that are maybe a little flashier than infrastructure. I think they're probably out there on the fringe a little bit, so we'll definitely be audited by the Treasury Department on how we spend these funds. So I think what Creighton and I have talked about is probably playing it a little closer to the vest than maybe what some of these other communities, like he mentioned to me with the PPP money, that are now in a position of having to pay that back because they didn't spend it appropriately. So we'd like to avoid that. And so I think sticking with kind of the fundamentals, and like I say, this has always been a council that's emphasized infrastructure. So just internally, Creighton and I have kind of looked at that one first. So.
Yeah, so to recap, so the amount that we will eventually be getting is just over 1.1 million. So I believe it's 1.12 million. We've already received half of that. So about 560,000 is what we've received, and we'll receive the other 560,000 in July or August of next year. So we'll get the other half at that point. There's 4 major buckets, and Scott and I have looked over these buckets a lot to see what would be best for our community to use those funds. And as Scott said, there's some other communities that are kind of going at some of these other buckets, and we've looked at them. Some of them they just don't align with what we could really spend them on. So we really have gone back to that infrastructure bucket. The other side is if we're able to do bigger projects, that's helpful. Bigger projects that we know are going to fit within the limits here, because as Scott said, what we would absolutely want to avoid is being audited on this money and then come to find, oh, well, we didn't fulfill this, so we have to give this portion back, or this project, small or big, we have to give that. That's something, of course, to avoid. We will have a federal audit with the amount of money that we spend here, and so that's another thing. So this money will get audited, it will get looked at, so we need to pay attention very closely to what we spend the money on. So infrastructure is one of the buckets. COVID-related, like future prevention of not only COVID, but other pandemics. You could spend money in that bucket. You could spend money on revenue replacement. And as I've talked about in the past, there weren't a lot of areas where we could have replaced revenue because we actually held fairly strong in most of them. There's a couple small ones, but not really big enough to make an impact there. So really it just kept coming back to that infrastructure, and specifically the infrastructure outlined is water, sewer, and broadband. So that's why we're looking at water projects today, and also the big storm sewer project that we have going already. So that's really where we've landed on these for now.
we've got probably the greatest flexibility of all those buckets Craig mentioned with the infrastructure. You know, there are so many, as he kind of alluded to, kind of conditions imposed upon all of those other buckets, if you will, that I think it's a stretch for us to try to meet these census tracts that were maybe disadvantaged as a result of the pandemic. And I think we'd have a difficult time meeting the burden and the test on some of those. But with infrastructure, it seems that under the rules, interim rules and guidelines proposed by the Treasury Department, that we have the greatest amount of flexibility.
Any questions for Creighton?
So again, we're going to have Adam kind of talk about a few of the water treatment plant projects that we'd like to propose, as well as Creighton mentioned, the big storm sewer project that we have would be a classic fit for the use of these funds as well. And so then that does also, at that point, lessen the burden on some of our other department funds to use those funds to leverage for other things as well. So,
Adam, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. I've got a handful of things that I've already put into this year's budget, and then also some other things after talking to Scott and realizing we wanted to look at some bigger items, knowing that these funds are available. Right out of the gate, we've got normally four high service pumps at the water plant. Right now we have 3 that are currently running. One of them has been down for quite some time, and we've been really picking the plan apart and fixing things as we go, just to kind of keep it, you know, within budget and not going crazy. But right now I'm looking at the redundancy. We have high service pump 3 and 4, which we did in 2015, work together, not at the same time, but they're basically like a brother-sister type deal, putting out 1,700 gallons per minute, and we switch between those. We just put in high service pump 1, which puts out 1,200 gallons per minute, and it's basically we can run that with one well, and it works together as far as the plant goes, and not draining water and messing with our chemicals. So what I'm proposing is I've got a deal for a vertical turbine pump motor that would replace the split case high service pump motor that's been down. And we add a VFD from TTI, and right now I'm still waiting on the numbers for the split case motor, but it's estimated we're looking at about $100,000, and that's something we're looking at. So it's basically, like I said, it's redundancy. We lost, out of those 2 brand new motors in 2015, we lost one to lightning strike, and then we were basically stuck with one, and it's kind of scary. If the other one goes, we're dead in the water. So having the extra backup, it sounds like, well, do we need 4? Well, each one of them does their own thing. Like the one that only puts out 1,200, basically we just use that for on Wednesday when we lost power. That one sits at the plant. We've got power to our well number 1, which is right there, and it did exactly what it was supposed to do. Just kept pressure in the system, didn't do anything above or beyond that we needed. And it'd be the same thing with this other pump. If we do lose one, which it happens, we know we're covered. So there's that, and I wasn't going to put that in this year. Again, just doing things, spacing it out. That was going to go in next year. So when Scott asked about that, moving on, I did bring up the chlorine room, and I gave you pictures of that and the proposal that I actually was for this year. This was also supposed to be part of the 2015 upgrade, but got kind of pushed aside. I had it in the budget, and then we ended up using the funds for something else as far as power went at the water plant, so we just kind of shifted that. So I guess 3rd time's the charm is to get this done now. Right now, we can see pretty much everything that happens at the water plant through the SCADA system. One thing we can't do or monitor necessarily or change without physically being in the chlorine room is the chlorine levels. So safety reasons, we like to stay out of there as much as possible. But it's also the way that it's set up. If the first picture just to kind of show you the 4 bottles there for when we first bring the water in, and 2 is for when the water goes out. But they switch back and forth. Now, because of that, it varies the way that the chlorine takes. For whatever reason, when it switches from one bottle to another, the chlorine level will shift. Also, when we have 3 different wells, we run 2 at a time, and we switch between those and give one a rest. Each well is different. So each well, depending on, even though they're coming from the same aquifer, when we're running 2 different wells, the amount of chlorine used changes. They'll eat more chlorine up. It's a thing. They're like their own living deals. So this would, by upgrading this, also because of the date and the age of the equipment that's in there, it would allow TTI to put this to the computer in the SCADA system, so we could set the chlorine level and then it would do it automatically, so we could keep a more consistent number instead of like it spiking and us going in and changing everything and kind of hoping with math that we get it right that time. And we've got a pretty good idea when we do switch, because we've been doing it. It's just kind of where we're going to have to adjust it to. So that's something that we were looking at. Do you have any questions on, I should probably slow down. Do you have any questions on the chlorine room?
I don't, but I might just build on what Mike had made a comment earlier when we were talking about some of these projects. So I think Mike and a few of the other guys have been around long enough to remember when we did the chlorine project and the high service pumps project and some of the, so like on the park project, we had those parameters, the low end and the high end. And I think it's almost with these past projects that Jason was involved with designing, you know, we operated kind of under similar theory there with kind of a lower parameter there. And these funds have now given us an opportunity after the fact to come in and achieve maybe that higher goal that we didn't do back then. So again, kind of the same kind of thing that we did with the park project there, where we looked for the kind of the lower end of that budget parameter, and that's what we did with these other projects. And now I think, again, just a unique opportunity to revisit it, and we've already designed it, and things are ready to be accommodated there. But now that the funding is available through this new bucket, if you will, we could go back and revisit for the higher range.
Just a personal comment. I rode my bicycle by the water treatment plant the day the chlorine leak happened, and I mean...
That explains a lot.
Yeah, you bet. I was glad I was outdoors, and it gets your attention in a hurry. So if we need something for keeping that chlorine contained, I'm all in.
I think we all understand where you're going with this, Adam. My question is, what is highest priority on down? Are the pumps higher than the chlorine, or? The one pump is how old is that pump?
Right now, all the pumps are within, 2015.
I thought we had one that's pretty old that we didn't replace.
The fourth one.
Yeah. The fourth one is, right now, we're looking at one that's it doesn't even work.
Doesn't work.
Yeah, so that would be the high service pump 2 is what we call it, but yeah, that one it's basically been torn down. I mean, so we do have.
How old is that pump? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, I think the manufacturer's World War II. I mean, I'm not kidding.
I remember when we did the project initially, I think some were 1945 kind
and
of
that's,
vintage.
and, I mean, original to the plant. I mean, we just replaced our backwash pump, and legitimately, that was that old.
Can you give us an idea where you're seeing priority on these projects?
I could flip a coin between the chlorine room and, honestly, between the chlorine room and the high service pump. Because we do have 3 working high service pumps, and 2 of them are the same, and then we have the smaller one. This one would be comparable to the 2 big pumps, so it would be putting out 1,700 gallons. It's a different style as far as it sucks vertically, where the other one is horizontal. So it's better for the level it's going on is better designed, and it should do better with pressure, that type of deal. But otherwise, the chlorine room with safety and being able to monitor that, I'd probably roll with that if I had to pick or choose. I mean, it's being able to, like right now, I can control the whole plant from my phone. So which gives us the opportunity to still be out and working, and I can turn around if there's a problem, it lets me know. I could adjust the chlorine with this going in from my phone and doing that too, if we have a problem, and I can go back and, you know, that type of deal. So I would probably
So
go
they're
with the
pretty
chlorine.
comparable in priority.
Yeah,
both of them.
but I would, if I had to pick, I'd say the chlorine for safety and everything else.
But Adam, isn't the recommendation to do both of these with the
Yeah, we
ARPA
have
funds?
plenty of money to
Yeah,
do.
I mean,
I was gonna say, this is not coming out of our budget, this is the ARPA money we're
Yeah,
getting,
yeah,
right?
we have more than enough to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I added, I mean, I just put down some things and just so that you could
Right.
decide if you wanted to do it
Well, I think it's
now or-
inevitable that these are both coming needs
Oh, yeah.
rather than wants.
Exactly. No, I would recommend that we move forward with both of these.
Okay, and then, so we also found with this last power outage, we realized, since this came up, I had Laner Electric look at a tower generator for the west tower, which is out over there by K&H. So the plant runs off of the tower levels from there. So if we lose power anywhere, we are running blind. We would basically have to go between all the towers and read the levels versus it coming to the plant. Because of the new generator and everything, that kicked off perfectly. It just basically switched. We went in and the computer was up. We could see everything, but everything flatlines. So this would be for a 30 kilowatt diesel generator with a 20 amp transfer switch. Brian Lehner said about 30 grand. I just had him give me a number because we talked about this 2 days ago and I knew we were gonna be here. And it would, in the same sense, we'd lose power. We would keep power at the west tower, and off of that level, it would still transmit to the water, or the water plant, and off that level, we could run the whole system. I mean, as far as the distribution system and see what's going on. So that was something else that I'm throwing in. He's gonna get me like a actual written quote, if that's something you wanna proceed with. If we didn't, we do it manually, and we just run between towers and see what's going on and that type of deal. There's 3 of us, so that's still possible. But again, if the funds are available, it wasn't a huge price tag, so that was something to add. Any questions with that?
Any questions, other questions?
I've got, so then, also, so in addition, the master water treatment plant control panel. That's, if you take a look, I showed a picture of our MCC room, and it's basically so you know what I'm talking about. All those panels in that are basically what they call buckets, and they're responsible for running the roof, exhaust, aerator, dewatering pump, all our well number 1, the scrubber, all our high service pumps. But in the back that you can see is the cabinet. Now the cabinet, I've been informed by TTI, was also something that was looked at in 2015 and was kind of passed over because we went with the high service pumps at the time. Tim with TTI has said that it'd be about 40 grand, maybe 50, plus minus. Again, this is not something he's gonna have to get me something written, but I wanted to get a number to upgrade this. Now, what you're looking at is probably 2/3 of that is just there, it's dead. But we don't know what is and what isn't. He was in there looking at it and touched the wire and I got alarms. So, and also I don't know, the books on the top, I'm not sure, it's not my field, but where everything's plugged into is over 5 years obsolete. So right now, if we did have a problem, we couldn't even replace these without trying to find them back door, and they'd be 4 or 5 times what they really cost, if not more. So this right here is the brains of the water plant. Everything goes through here to the computer and whatnot. So he recommends that if this is doable, to add that as well. And basically, with Ryan Lehner would go, the 2 of them, or their company, and Ryan Lehner would come in and, go through and trace all this out, get rid of the stuff that we don't need anymore, that we've upgraded, but got left in place, and then turn around and put it back together and with reliable parts. And so we know we're good to go. So it's, I mean, it's everything that the council's done so far in the last 4 or 5 years, we've done in pieces, and I think everything's going the right direction, and it's making our job a whole lot easier. not only to run the water plant, but to be able to be out in the field doing other things instead of worrying about stuff breaking down at the water plant or having issues. And we're doing a lot of the maintenance ourselves, which was something that kind of was laxing before or being sent out. Well, we're more hands-on. So we like to make sure that in the middle of the night, we can fix it versus waiting for somebody else to fix it. So this is just kind of another thing that would, take care of us as far as in the water plant and its, ability to function correctly. So.
So I think what we'll probably do at a future council meeting is, I think Craig and I will work on a resolution that identifies how we're going to spend the ARPA funds, and it'll itemize these kinds of projects in it, and so you'll have that before you at some future council meeting to designate these are where the funds are going to go. But again, I think I'm here in the council supporting that, infrastructure is the right path, and prioritizing the storm sewer improvements and water improvements are the priorities.
This is a must.
And the only other thing I had in there is also something that I added to the budget. Like I said, we're just trying to separate it out, was these disconnects, and it's more or less with the pictures that are there. They're the switches that are below, and then there's a picture of the switch, and it's in our pipe gallery, and it just kind of shows you that we've been doing a lot of work. We got the pipe gallery painted and redone, but those switches are not good not good with the environment that's there. Plus, we can't lock them out or tag them out, so we have to shut those off to shut off our actuators so we can work on them safely. That I put in as well, just again to kind of keep moving with the process of getting everything up to safety standards, and so we can work safely and continue to do our job.
Thanks, Adam. Do we need Jason?
He's up next on the East Main Streets. No, you don't want to add anything to that. I think we probably beat that horse long enough.
All right.
Yeah.
He left off the pencils he needs.
The pencils?
Yes.
He's got pencils.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was good there.
Are there any questions about any of the other?
Adam, I got a quick question. We're talking about doing some upgrades to that cabinet there and making sure that it's technologically safe and efficient and all that. I don't know if this would all qualify, but the GIS mapping that we've talked about a few years.
That would qualify, yes, and I've kind of thought about that too. So, yeah, they talked about that in the budget. I think Jeremy and Adam both have some of that in there. So I think, as we kind of see how the budget, again, I think Graydon mentioned we got about 1.1 million. So, I think that of the things that we've talked about here, that would be on the lower priority. So that storm sewer project's about 670. And Adam's given us a pretty nice list of things here, so maybe we see where we're at with that. But yes, that would definitely be something that would be water and sewer and storm water related, and would be something that could fit within that.
I just, in the last couple of weeks, had a sewer repair out just down the street from Scott's house, and it's tough sometimes knowing the infrastructure, and just in that little section between the sidewalk and the curb, there was, I think, 6 lines that were part of the fiber optic. There were 2, maybe 3, 2 old ones for gas, 1 for gas that's live, and then what else was in there? There was just a lot of stuff, and it's hard knowing where all that is, and so I just wonder if we were able to get that, which it's not cheap, but at some point, will we know what all is in the ground with that mapping?
At least, for us, it would basically be our infrastructure alone. As far as water, storm, sewer, we could add, the cemetery could be added to that, and it's basically as we go, you can add to it, and all the departments would be able to look at it, including Jason would have access to it. So in designing some of these things or street projects, the information is there. In the winter for us, it would be great because we'd be able to instead of trying to look for something and chopping through ice, looking for valve boxes, we'd be able to walk right up on it and it would tell us we were right there, and that type of thing. And again, for just planning and everything, it's an awesome system. I know Scott and I went last year to Charles City, and they've had it for a few years. The first time I had seen it, it was amazing, and then a couple of years later, they had added to it, and that's something you could do to keep the cost down instead of paying for it all at once. We could do, one, the water, the storm, and then the sewer, or vice versa. Everything that's, like, as far as the sewer or storm goes and all the cammering, that would be put in there, so you'd be able to pick a spot and pull up every piece of information. Every picture that we take would go into it, so it wouldn't just be location, it would be all the information and everything that goes with it. And you can see work that's been done, as far as, it's,
Excavation
and it's, and it could be every few years you have them come out and just add whatever we've added, and update it, and then it's pretty awesome, and everybody's doing it. And we have records, but they're paper, they're old video.
It's a struggle. I've done several repairs, and each time it's just like, I don't know, start digging.
Something, if it does fit in, I would definitely highly recommend it. And it's something to, like you said, we can do it in a process, in a phase, and that type of thing, so. Keep costs down.
Good suggestion, though, that's very appropriate, so, yeah.
Thank you. We're all done?
Okay.
Thanks. Very good, very good. Number 5, East Main Avenue Street Reconstruction Project. Scott?
Yep, just gonna have Jason review we had a arborist, Jeremy and Jason hired, the city hired, but they consulted with an arborist on the East Main portion. A few members of council had expressed some interest in some of the potential tree removals and what could stay, what could go. So we did retain a consultant to look at that, and that individual did prepare a report for Jason and Jeremy, so I asked Jason to give kind of a highlight here of what the recommendations were. You all got a copy of that, but kind of go into some detail about what's going to have to go, and maybe the plan for the future in terms of replacing lost trees, not only on this phase, but maybe the other phase that we did between 14th and 20th. Maybe we could do them all together. So, Jason, go ahead.
So we'd heard from a few of you the desire to save some of these trees that are between the existing sidewalk and the existing curb along East Main for this next phase. Neither Jeremy or I are tree experts, so like Scott said, the city did contract with a certified arborist, and he did a tree assessment for the Main Street project. The focus of the assessment was to inventory the trees to be impacted, the types, the current health, and the expected impact the project would have on the health of these trees. There are 22 trees between 8th Street and 14th Street that he analyzed as part of this. 17 of those are on the north side, 5 of those trees are on the south side. The report goes through tree by tree, explaining species, size, condition, etc. In the end, there are 5 trees that are ash trees. And the opinion there was that the ash trees could be removed because it's just a matter of time on those. And there were 5 others within the report that he indicated was either a candidate for removal or recommended removal. So there, 10 out of the 22 trees essentially are recommended for removal between the ash and then the other ones that he recommended for condition. He also gave us some best management practices. If we are going to work around these trees, protect these trees, that as far as how far away we need to stay from the tree to protect the roots, to not damage the tree. And per the standards, the best management practice indicates that we go 5 times the diameter away from the base of the tree before we start cutting roots. The cutting of any roots closer than that will shock the trees and send them into a state of decline. So his conclusion is if we're going to keep the trees, we can mitigate the effects of construction on trees by establishing a root and tree protection zone. So there's some drawings that we provided, and on those drawings there's red circles on there around each of the trees. Those red circles are the root protection zone, as recommended per the best management practices, which is 5 times the diameter of the tree away from the trunk. In the top left corner on that first page, we have a typical cross-section that shows the construction. And then on the bottom, you can see we sketched in some roots there, and we're showing the root protection zone. Essentially, we are going to be into that root protection zone. We are going to be damaging trees. And this is just a single tree we picked. We didn't do them all, but Several of the trees are much closer to the curb than this one that's shown in the typical section. All of the circles on the map overlap the street paving. As far as excavation work goes for the street paving, we're gonna be 11 inches below the top of curb to the bottom of the slab, 8 inches of rock and another foot of prepared subgrade. So we're gonna be down we're gonna be down 2 feet from the top of the existing ground there, damaging ruts. We can look at redesigning utilities to protect trees. This one, it wouldn't be very difficult because most of the utilities are under the street. The problem with this stretch is the width of the street. This is a 43-foot wide street. You know, a typical residential street is 31-foot wide, so there's very little space between the sidewalk and the curb on this phase, just like the last phase. This is something we looked at prior to the 2016 phase. You go further east on Main, the street is narrower. We looked at it, we discussed it. Should we consider narrowing up the rest of East Main all the way to 8th Street as these projects progressed? And at that time, the decision was made to keep it the existing width that was there now. So with the very little space between the sidewalk and the curb, it's about 5.5 feet for most of this. We are recommending that the trees between the sidewalk and the curb are gonna have to be removed. However, in talking with Scott, we would like to follow with a landscape plan, a planting plan to reestablish planting some trees from 8th Street all the way to 20th Street to reestablish what was there before. There's different practices that can be done now as well as far as planting the new trees. They make root shoots. When you plant these trees, you can put around the tree so it pushes the roots down, so those roots won't be heaving the street, they won't be heaving the sidewalk, and they'll stay out of the utilities that we put in there. That's something that's a little newer. There is a cost with it, but it is something that we would recommend in the future so we don't heave the sidewalk, heave the gutter, and impact drainage or create tripping hazards as these trees grow over time.
So now, Jason, in terms of maybe you said this while I was out, but the plan for removal of these trees. So we have our neighborhood meeting coming up January 8th, or something like that. So the anticipated schedule on removal of these trees would be?
So as far as tree removal, because of the funds that are involved in this, we can't take the trees down during the migratory bat season. So the trees would need to be removed in the winter to not impact the project schedule. So we would look at holding the public meetings, educating everybody, explaining to everybody why we're doing what we're doing along this corridor. And then after that, Jeremy would get some quotes to take down some of the trees that he can't handle in-house. And some of those he'd likely take down with city staff. We'd leave the stumps, we'd pull the stumps as part of the project, which is similar to what we've done in several of these projects in the past.
So this is nothing new for us.
It isn't. We don't like tearing trees down. We're not tearing them down just to accommodate a paving machine on this project. It's the sheer width of the street. It's just too wide to keep these trees in there. We try and work around them. We are gonna have to likely go on some private property with some sidewalk to get around them. And then in the end, we're gonna damage the roots to the point that the trees are gonna end up declining anyways.
So you're saying all 22 have to come out? At the public meeting, are you gonna have the alternative that we're gonna be looking at down the road for replacement?
We can work that up, yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be very
I think
helpful.
it'd be very wise to do that.
Yeah.
Well, tell them, go look at North Shore Drive. It's in front of Mike's house. That's what we do
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So that's example of.
Jason, when you're gonna do that and you're gonna tell the public, here's how we're gonna put new trees back, what's the systematic way of doing that? Is it every 3rd, 6th, 9th house, or who gets a tree, who doesn't get a tree
Yeah.
in the future?
We'll put together a planting plan. I think we should review it with the council before we review it with the entire public or the entire street corridor, but I guess we don't have that approach yet. There's street lights in there as well that we have to accommodate, so we'll put them in between the street lights, but once we work that up, we will present that to council.
How would we respond if somebody saw that we were gonna put a tree in their easement in the future and they said, I really don't want a tree in there? And it looks like you're trying to do it in a way that is gonna make Maine look the best, and somebody doesn't want a tree, could somebody not get a tree?
I guess that, to me, would be a council decision if you didn't want to do that. The other option is they could put trees on the private side of the property line as well, outside the city's right of way. And we could look at doing something like that as well.
And like, maybe Mike said, or somebody said these are, 5 of them are ash, right?
Yeah.
And you got 2 that are soft maples that, believe it or not, were distributed by the city to plant back in the 70s, and they're terrible, the worst thing. So, you know, I mean, it's got to be done, so. Any other comments, questions? Jason, do you have any? Scott, anyone?
No, I think we're good to go. I just wanted to follow up with that because I know a few of you had expressed some interest and concern on that, so we wanted to take the necessary steps there to get a good plan put together and communicate that to the affected property owners, and we'll do that.
Yep, important that it came here.
Yep.
Very good. Number 6, City Hall administrative side security improvements and other updates. Scott?
Yep, just, you know, a few years back, Mike mentioned it here a little while ago, you know, we had modernized some portions of our building here. Most of the improvements took place over on the police department side when the fire department vacated all of that space. But there are some security-related improvements that we'd like to implement over on the administrative sides of things, and maybe do an upgrade to some of the office space there. So Berglund and Cram did that project for us back in, I can't remember what year, 2016 or 15 or somewhere in there, but I did reach out to them and get a proposal to kind of come in and do some concept planning. So if you're good with that, I'd put that on a future agenda for them to, again, kind of do like what they're doing with the South 15th Street Playground, but come in, kind of do an assessment and analysis of these are the proposed security-related improvements that we would suggest, and maybe some more upgrades to the administrative side of the hall building here.
Comments, Council?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I think that's important, Scott, as we've discussed before. I think in this day and age, some upgraded security features for our front desk people, entryways, and having them more secure, I think are very important. So
You know,
I think it's a very good idea, actually, yeah.
Yep, we put that plexiglass up as a result of the pandemic. It's worked out really well, and the office staff like that, so we might look at, again, part of the improvements might be to take down that. It was sort of a temporary, kind of an interim solution, but to make that more permanent kind of situation.
Sure,
So-
and more substantive, I
Oh,
would
yes,
think, as
yep,
well, yeah.
yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's very important for those employees there. That's a good move. Good
Good,
move.
okay.
Anything else on that one?
Nope,
Move
nope.
on to number 7,
Nope.
city administrators.
Yep, start with the Wellness Center memberships. So currently, the city has a wellness program for employees, so we pay 50% of the cost of a single membership. There are certain goals and criteria that you have to meet. It's done on a reimbursement basis. And Creighton and I were talking with Adam, and with the opening of the new Wellness Center, we'd like to maybe expand that at least for 2022. I don't know about beyond that, but just with the inaugural opening of the City Wellness Center, expand that to not just a single membership, but to a membership of the employees choosing. So it could be a single membership, a family membership, or a couple membership, whatever would fit. So a single membership is generally, you're talking probably about the city share of that's about $250. Family membership probably about $350. So gives, I think, a little more flexibility for the employee, and then it creates a situation, hopefully, where maybe we can encourage people to utilize any facility, but obviously our interest would be in the one that we're running, and maybe build them into a more longer-term customer down the road. So if you're okay with that, we'd like to do that.
Head nod, Council? Question?
So this isn't really anything new, it's just an expansion?
Just a small expansion of what we're already doing, yep.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Then I just wanted to follow up, just keep going here on the Highway 18 corridor study. Gary brought this up at previous workshop, some interest in taking a look, especially everything west of Highway 20 there on US Highway 18, the corridor there, maybe reaching out to the DOT and having them consider a speed study along that corridor from 20th Street west. So I did follow up with that and have had some conversations with the DOT, and they are certainly willing to do that, and have said they will do that. So I've given them the head nod to go ahead with that. They said it's probably going to be like a 6 to 9 month process, though. So just wanted to follow up and let you know that we did pursue that, and they have agreed to do that. So we'll be proceeding with that. And then I think Jennifer laid out for you copies. Nelson and I met. I think Bennett may be involved a little bit with this one. We did have a meeting with the North Iowa Events Center, so I would probably want to schedule a workshop here soon with the representatives from that group to have them come in and talk about. They're going to be doing a pretty extensive building project out there, and they're doing some fundraising for that, and I think they're approaching the county and the city of Mason City, and they've also approached us about being financial partners in that project. So I've laid out the information that they gave Nelson and I when we had the meeting here a few weeks ago on that. So I just want to give you that to review, and then I think I'll probably schedule something in the future here, maybe in the next week, see if we can get them in for a workshop meeting.
I think that's a good idea. Good idea. We've been partners with the county on many things.
Yep, many
This
things,
is
yep, yep.
just one more, and
Yep. And I'm just going to mention also maybe a couple other items. 27th Avenue South and South 8th Street, Nelson, Gary, Ben, and I were all meeting yesterday with the county. So we worked on a letter with the consultant, and we're going to have both the county and the city sign that letter, and we'll submit that to the DOT, asking for traffic engineering assistance program funding assistance to take a look at that intersection of 27th Avenue South and South 8th Street. And so that's going to be in by the end of the year, and hopefully we'll hear on that in a few months. And if that's approved, then we'll be able to proceed with engineering traffic study at that intersection. So just give you a follow-up update on that letter will be going in to be signed by both the chairman of the board and the mayor, for Mayor Crabb, and then Council or Supervisor Callahan from the county will be signing that one. And then also, as you mentioned, on the cooperation with the county, we're also going to be working with the county on a comprehensive plan for the area as well. And think back to one of the workshops we had here recently. Gary had asked about taking a look at that area around City Park. And so that's something that we're including in that RFP for that comprehensive plan, is to look at that. So that's going out for an RFP. We're going, Mason City, Clear Lake, and the county all going in on a comprehensive plan there. And one area that I asked them to take special look at would be that area around City Park for traffic congestion and parking and those things. So that's another cooperation project.
questions for Scott, council? Thank you, Scott. Any other business, council or Scott?
One thing, if I may, Mayor. Has anything happened on any additions or changes to our dock ordinance?
No, I've not done anything on that. No.
Okay.
No, I don't know if we had, did we have clear direction at that last workshop? I don't remember on that.
No.
Not that I
Yeah, I don't think we got a clear head.
Well,
on that.
not because I didn't bring it up.
Right, right.
I thought we were gonna look at it.
I thought we were at least going to look at it and maybe have some future discussion on it, and possibly find something we could bring to a vote. I know there's differing opinions, and I appreciate that, but I hate to see it just die.
All right, well, maybe what we can do is, when we get that workshop for the event center, I'll add that again as an item when Mark is also back, and then we'll have the full group here, and we get that, try to get that like in the next week.
Anything
you.
else, council? Thanks, Scott. Good discussion this morning. Thank you.